And we're live. Hi, I'm Autumn Keynes. I'm connecting virtually with the folks at the Digital Pedagogy Lab Institute with our volunteer learning movement, Virtually Connecting. I'm going to start with the on-site folks to introduce themselves. How are things going, guys?
So I'm Maha Bali. I am from Egypt, and I'm here co-teaching the network track with Kate Bowles, who's hiding behind the camera. And it's the second day of the event, and this room is our wonderful group of participants who are pushing the conversations really, really deep, and a lot deeper than I expected, I think, over 2 days. And
you're being called the chicken hate on screen.
So for people who are watching this, someone just wrote something on chat that Rebecca called out. And I'm also the co-founder of Virtually Connecting, and we thought that if we're talking about network learning, that this might be one of the opportunities to sort of showcase one of the things we've been doing with network learning. So I'm gonna skip Laura for a second, Rebecca, and then come back to Laura.
So I'm Rebecca Hogue. Yeah, I'm participating in Digital Pedagogy Lab. I'm a co-director of Virtually Connecting as well, and I'm just so excited to be able to show people. And actually, one thing we didn't talk about or mention, I think, is that we're about the conversation. So not about a topic, but about a conversation. So we'll show you what we're about, and I think this is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just Laura Govia, and I'm here hanging out for the day, and very happy to be here.
And we wanted to see, we were dying to see Laura, so we invited her to give a small part in our track, and I think she raised a lot of really, really interesting conversation, a lot of very different kinds of questions, and I think we'll let the virtual folks introduce themselves, and then we'll start a conversation.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to start off with Alan Levine. Alan, can you give an introduction to everyone?
Yes, I'm just Laura Gogia.
I love you, Alan.
And I'm Alan Levine, and I can't say anything seriously. I'm happy to be coming to you from my home in Strawberry, Arizona, and been kind of tagging along with Virtual Connecting, both virtually and in present for a while, but I've yet to meet Maha, so we're working on that.
I know. It's a killer. Where's Felix?
It's not personal. Come here, buddy. Come here. Come on. Say hi. Come on. Come on.
Oh, okay.
There he is.
And he's very pixelated.
Yeah.
He's having a bad day, I guess.
Okay.
He's taking a nap.
That's unique to his breed. Being pixelated. Catherine, can you give us an introduction, please?
Yes, hi everybody. Delighted to be here. I have met Maha, but I've never met Alan, so we can do a lot of this tonight. Also been involved with Be Connecting for a while, thankfully, because I am speaking to you and I live in Galway in the west coast of Ireland. So I tend to get to a good few conferences in the UK, but not in the States or Canada. So this has been a lifeline for me in a lot of ways. So really glad to join you.
Great to have you with us, Catherine. Thank you. Christina, you're next. Christina, you need to unmute. I think you're still muted.
It keeps muting.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. I'm Christina Hendricks. I teach philosophy in the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, BC in Canada. And I attended the Digital Pedagogy Lab Institute last week in Vancouver for the first time. And it was fantastic. And now I really wish I were going to the one there, but at least I can connect this way.
Very nice. Thank you for joining us, Christina. And Chuck, you're next.
Chuck Pearson, physical sciences nerd, Tusculum College in Greenville, Tennessee, geek at large, rambler, sayer of random words. I'll mute myself now.
Thank you, Chuck. It's always a pleasure. Chuck, and Debbie.
You're a man.
Debbie, you're up next. Can you give us an introduction? Where are you from? And I'm curious, have you ever been on a Virtually Connecting before? We were talking about that a little bit before you joined us.
I think she has, yeah.
I do need you to unmute. Yep. Yep. You.
Yay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm clearly not technical at all. I'm Debbie Bath. I'm a senior academic developer, and I'm based in Swansea in South Wales in the UK. And it's about 9:30, and it's nice and dark outside. I've done a couple of virtually connecting bits and pieces before. And I love it. I think it's such a brilliant idea. It's so, not that I'm very good at it, mind, because I can never get my headphones to work. But it's really great. I have met a couple of people, and I can see so many names. I'm just like, oh, I've seen all these people. That's brilliant. So yeah, I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you so much for facilitating it.
Just a quick
I
note,
should be quiet now.
working at the time, the problem is probably with the headset, not with you.
We do have a tendency to do that, don't we? We blame ourselves before we blame the technology. You're more important than the technology, and we're all learning together. So welcome, Debbie. It's wonderful to have you here. Jim Luke, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Jim Luke, and I'm coming to you live from the World Intergalactic Headquarters, also known as my home office. I teach economics at Lansing Community College, and I am also, for half of the time, and the other half is I'm chief, I guess I call it chief instigator of the Open Learning Lab here. And I want to make a note of this. You said it was just Laura Gogia. I have to try to remember that.
Okay, so there's a story here. It was a 1,000-person plenary. He forgot my name in front of people. All right, moving on.
I was there. I was co-presenting with them. It was quite the moment. All right, we got Karen up next.
You're muted.
Yep. No, so hi, Karen Cancelosi. I'm a biology professor at Keene State College here in Keene, New Hampshire. And I want to say hi to Miranda.
Hey, Karen.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
And I really wish, good. I really wish I was there with all of you guys too. I was also in Vancouver with Christina, but so.
We do too. We were sure.
It's always great to have you. Thank you so much. And finally, but by no means least, because she was actually the first one to log in. That's why she's the last one on my screen. Sheila.
Hi, everybody. My name's Sheila McNeil. I'm a senior lecturer in digital learning at Glasgow Caledonian University here in Glasgow in Scotland. I've met a few people in virtually connecting. I've met Alan and Maha and Catherine and Jim. And I'm a relative newbie to virtually connecting. I think my first virtually connecting session was at OER 17 this year, but like Catherine, this is just a fantastic way to find out what's going on, and I'm really excited to just be part of the conversation of what you've been doing this week, so really looking forward to tonight.
Thank you so much, Sheila. It's great to have you with us. And I'm Autumn Keynes. I'm talking to you from Columbus, Ohio. I'm the Associate Director of Academic Technology at Capital University, and I'm a co-director of Virtually Connecting. It looks like we had somebody else join us there on site. Is there somebody else there who wants to introduce themselves?
Oops.
Hi, Hoda.
Can she see me?
Yeah, she can.
I can see you.
She can hear you too.
I can hear you too.
This virtually connecting session.
There
Yesterday.
isn't any of the screen.
Yeah, the screen is over there, but the camera is here. It's different than at home.
It's a different setup. We got a little more complicated with it this time, Hoda.
So as she's grown a little bit older, she sometimes likes to type on the side with people while we have the conversation, so that helps a little bit. So, do you guys have any questions for us? Or do you guys have any questions for them?
Did any of you guys see the keynote?
No.
We're getting close.
A little bit with Sarah Goldberg.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, I think it would be great maybe to get just an overview of some of the key things, that maybe some of the themes that have been emerging from your conversation today, or just get a flavour of what's happening. That would be really useful to start, for me anyway.
Yeah, so often people just want to have a flavor, so would someone like to roll forward and share with them? Laura, do you want to share with them?
No. I I left my notes down there. I was thinking, I'm gonna go get my notes, but I was thinking about service, because we were having a discussion about the word service. But quote, I don't have the quote, I just have service as power is what I wrote down, because that was my thought and the discussion.
Okay, so Laura, go get put up a quote.
Okay, so the quote that I put up that I think triggered the most conversation was a John Udall quote about so context is a service that we provide for each other. Discuss. So in this conversation about social learning and about construction of knowledge and what is context online, in discussion of voice and audience and how we negotiate those things together, I put up a quote. I did. Oh, thank you. She drew me a flower. And I put up a quote that said, context is a service that we provide for each other. And then he goes on to talk about the fluid nature of negotiation and all of that. But that seemed to touch a chord, and every single word of the quote. Context and service and
the other thing, the other thing I wrote down here, the other thing I wrote down is what we say isn't always what is heard.
Ah, yeah.
And that sort of I thought was kind of key with even that quote is that everybody in the room sort of heard something different when they heard it.
which brings an interesting conversation about, so what is real? So is it what I say? Am I the one who owns the sentiment? I mean, I'm the one who said well, I didn't say the quote, but I put the quote up there. Like, I own the slide. Yeah. Okay. You picked up different parts of the slide. And so who owns what and what is real? And where do we go forward with that?
Did you guys let a philosopher in the room? I'm looking at you. I like to think about this in terms of the plight of the artist a lot of times too, because I feel like I see this happen with artists a lot. And as an artist, I feel this, like you spend a lot of time creating something, you get really invested in like the way that you, what you think it means, and then you let it out into the world and somebody else has a completely different take on it. And sometimes that's fun, sometimes that's playful, sometimes that's interesting, but sometimes it can be hard too.
It reminds me a lot, especially the latter part of the conversation there, of and I'm digging way back when I was in school with rhetoric theory and communications theory about and how really most folks conceive of it wrong. It's really a case of, as a speaker, you encode something. It's almost as if you encode it, but you don't even know what the decoder ring they're going to use to decode it. And so, it's the stuff we say, that's why it's so important to have the context, to know what they're thinking. The context is two-way, I guess, is what I would say, is you can't really put the message out there right. Well, there's not even a right, but you can't do an effective message unless you know enough about the context to how they're likely to decode it.
And every context is informed by that hearer's experience. All the different experiences we bring into a conversation informs how we respond to what each person is saying.
So one word that I didn't use, but I really wanted to, was performativity.
Yeah. Can I ask one more question about the quote? I'm particularly struck by the word service there, because I know we do talk a lot about content.
We spent half an hour talking about that.
Service.
Okay, so I was going to ask how that was kind of unpacked by
Laura, you started it all.
I'm happy to share what the quote provoked for me, and that is particularly after Sarah Goldrick-Rabb's keynote yesterday. I'm feeling very aware of the context of the commodification of higher education, which is the wider context in which we are trying to enact something like critical digital pedagogy. And within that context, service uneasily attaches itself to things like customer service. and service providers. And those are terms, those terms propose a kind of relationship between teachers and learners that, at least to my understanding of critical digital pedagogy, are somewhat at odds. I completely grasp that that was not the context in which John Udall was offering his quote, or the context in which Laura shared the slide with us, but that was my opening reflection on the slide. And then there were other comments and ways of thinking about service in varied ways.
Like from a more vocational way. So you have the transactional way, you have a vocational way. I keep coming back to service leadership and my uneasy feelings about the concept of service leadership, because in nature and an idea, it's a beautiful thing. But I think that it sets up things like emotional labor. So even going beyond like customer service, but this concept of you should do this, you should put in the emotional labor to make yourself a good person, sort of thing. So there's different ways in which service can be considered negative, and with service being almost I think in some places like a gendered term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
It's really interesting. One of the things that is coming to my mind as you're talking there is kind of notions of services and notions of space and context as a space. And sometimes the spaces we provide, they help set that context and give us the room to have the discussions, to have the critical discussions as well. And yeah, I'm just kind of thinking about space and service and how they're sometimes turned around in ways you've been describing there as well. But yeah, it's very interesting. So.
I find provide kind of an odd word there, because
it's calling her philosopher. She just put the quote up. And
dude, it was about context, okay? But it's really funny because it's all these other words.
Go ahead, Alan.
Well, no, it gets the context, because it makes context sound like a thing, like we give it and we contribute to it, we create it. It's very complex, and I have a friend who's going through a very difficult situation, and he's being asked to take total responsibility for a problem in a relationship, and no single person ever has a single responsibility. It's the interplay of our personalities and actions and interactions. I just kind of find like it kind of simplifies context to be like a product or something, and it's
you can control it, you mean?
Yeah, well, you can control it or rest on one person. It's such complex, and we contribute to it. We participate in it, but I don't think I give you context, or I don't put context in the room there. I mean, I help create it, maybe. But everybody can.
A larger part of the conversation that he was having was about this concept of we amplify and filter for each other. So putting that into this conversation around context. So in online spaces, the fact that, and it came up in someone was talking about how we can trust the third party. Like if we don't know someone online, but they know someone we know and we trust that person. And so that's actually an example of what he was talking about in the larger talk of we can filter or amplify for other people. And so that's a little bit more context around the context.
Context around the context, really? I love it.
This is why they invited me today.
Can we hear a little bit more about some of the other magical moments today?
Autumn just retweeted. I shared all the snippets that I posted. So Autumn, if you can just put the Twitter URL on there so that the people online and some people here can see those images. I shared the quote and also some of the other snippets from this morning. Summaries.
I'm loving your photographs, Rose.
I'm glad you retweeted because I don't know everybody's handle. Thank you, Autumn.
Yeah, no, it's great. I really love it.
Which is another one of the things that Jesse and Sean mentioned the first day is if someone doesn't want to be photographed and someone is taking photographs, please tell them. And they said that the very first day, so no one is put in that situation of that.
Which kind of bridges the idea of safety, which is the other thing that we were talking about this afternoon. And kind of whose safety on the internet, because we were talking about it from different perspectives, right? From the teacher's perspective, from the student's perspective, from, I don't know, someone else.
That is hard to do, I think, if you're at a conference like that and you don't want your photograph taken. Like, you'd have to think about where you're going to sit for the keynote. You wouldn't be able to sit up front in the keynote because they're live streaming the keynote, and I always see who's in the first 5 rows, right? So you would have to position yourself in a different place. And then, I don't know, I mean, how would you, with that many people, how would you even make it known to everyone? Would you, like, wear a special t-shirt or something?
That's what I was thinking.
The virtually connecting t-shirt idea, right?
Yeah, I was wondering about that because so many people will just, take a picture of the room or take a picture of the table next to them or whatever, and then just tweet that out. There was something, it was an event I went to recently where we were all participating in an activity, and the activity required us to make comics out of our images. And the person who was going to tweet it made sure to ask everybody who was in the comic, is it okay if it goes up? But we don't all do that for all the pictures that we're posting. So that's really interesting. I think about this a lot with my kid, but I don't necessarily think about it as much with adults. I should.
Well, and especially like your face is data these days with facial recognition software and all of that. So I had a quick thought about getting back to context a little bit, and something that I think is just trying to think about, networking and context, and especially digital networking. And so like the work we do with Virtually Connecting, or some of the CMOOCs that I've seen many of you in conversations on Twitter and Twitter chats. So it occurs to me that there is something with broadening your context and getting to the point where you can see other people's context, and pushing yourself to open yourself to being able to recognize that in other people. And I do think that this work does an amazing job of doing that, or at least it has done that for me. I've had situations where I've really felt like I had a certain perspective on something, and I felt like it was true, and I felt like it was right, just to come across somebody, usually from another country, usually somebody from a different context, a different religion, different background, whatever, who was able to present that thing in a way that I could realize that it wasn't any less true, but it was different. It was different than the way that I understood it. And that by realizing that, I was able to recognize whatever that thing is in such a more rich way.
I have to just pause here because it's 5, and session time here is over. Okay, and I want to talk to Autumn, but session time is also over. And so you folks can stay if they would like to, but also if someone has to run away, and we won't have like students again against you if you have to go. And what do you want to say to Autumn? And then you'll leave us to talk a little bit more, right? Now you have nothing to say.
Hi, Hoda. I love you.
I miss you also.
I miss you too.
She just saw her 3 days ago. She saw her. It was not a long time ago, like physically. Not online. And she's coming in 2 days, by the way. Autumn's gonna be
I'll see you in 2 days, Hoda. 2 days. Count them down. Okay, do we have any parting thoughts from anybody on site, or anybody who is, joining us from around the globe?
There are several people who actually hung back because they know they have their own virtually connecting sessions later.
There's George. He's hiding.
Good to see you. Finally. I was hiding in the back. Because I was on yesterday, so I wanted everybody else to have a chance to talk.
Hey, George.
Hi, Catherine.
I got a question.
I'm still trying to, I remember and I recognize these names, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's the actual person compared to the vocabulary, like Christina, this is Rose. You know, like I never get a chance to see actual faces, and then like when I first saw Maha on that first day I saw her in the lobby, it was like, really? Like I can touch her now, you know, it's interesting. So I'm looking forward to meeting you in person, Autumn.
Absolutely. Me too.
I get two thoughts that came to me because I've been as you've been talking, I'm stuck on this context thing and that quote.
Keeps coming back to context, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, two thoughts that are coming is we really need to emphasize, I think, I'm actually growing uncomfortable with the quote, context is a service we provide. And I'll tell you why, because it obligates us, it sounds like it puts too much power.
That was the thing I had, power.
Context has to be negotiated. I mean, it reminds me, for example, I'm thinking of administration, faculty meetings and stuff where we've been talking about how to do certain things online. And they've told me what the context was, the students were doing stuff. And I'm going, no, you don't get it. That's, you know, there's other context. There's other situations that happen. And then that led me to my second thought, which is I wonder, since there's a power issue in defining the context, I mean, the context is critical because otherwise we don't understand the message. But if there's a power issue in who gets to define the context, I think that obligates third parties, like, you know, to speak up and to help define things. Like, you know, two thoughts. The one I just gave there of, you know, of me trying to advocate for, I'm thinking of conversations we had where the school was trying to do these, you know, lockdown, proctored, remote, film everything going on in the student's house while they're taking some exam software. And, you know, I'm trying to bring up context that they just haven't thought about. Or I'm also thinking about when at OER 17, the keynote speech that Maha gave was eye-opening to me, where she was giving context of Creative Commons licenses in other situations around the world, you know, places that weren't the US or Canada, which I'm pretty familiar with. And it was really eye-opening because it doesn't change my feelings about Creative Commons is a good thing, but I do realize it's not the universally good thing in all situations. So anyway, so that's my 2 cents worth. Well, I shut up the room, didn't I?
No, give them time. You just dumped a lot there, man. You gotta give it time to sort of ruminate there. I love these little 1 word or 2 word, 3 word context happens. Context is everything. Like I want to get T-shirts now. Context happens, man.
That word is never going to have the same connotation anymore. Every time like it comes up on the keynote or whatever, we're going to be like, everyone in the stream is going to laugh every time somebody on the main stage says context.
You want to warn Jesse and Sean actually about the rest of the week? Any keynoters or
well, the next
everybody in the network's track.
Okay.
Could I would just like to add a bit more context to the discussion. You know, there's probably many of us who are coming in some way through or around educational theory and some of the debates around or between Vygotsky and Dewey and others. And I happen to have had a graduate school advisor who is one of the key American cultural psychologists responsible for translating Vygotsky's work. And I remember so clearly one of the articles he had us read for a graduate seminar, which was all about, 30 pages of debate over translating Vygotsky's theory of context and whether Americans could grasp the definition of context as described by Vygotsky in transliterated form.
Wow, that's big. That's a lot of
So we're now on terrain of like whole intercultural scholarly debate.
Right, right.
What's the etymology of context with text?
That's a great question. Anybody want to do a quick etymology lookup on context?
Yeah, I'm looking. I
You can get there first.
Tell virtual and on-site folks that came on to go to small meeting.
I'm still here, so,
You're-
and
you
a
can
bunch
keep
of people are
going,
still here, so we can keep going for a little bit.
Talk to them when they all go off the air, whatever you like.
Yeah, I'm
We'll
looking.
see you tomorrow, inshallah.
At least say hi, Kate. Come on.
Bye, Maha.
It's to we.
There we go.
Hey, there she is.
Kate,
Autumn, can't wait to see you again.
Context is to weave. Yeah, together. To weave together. That's what context means. The etymology is Latin. Comes from the word con and texere, which means to weave. Contextus. Oh, really? That is so interesting. Yes.
And the way I weave things together might be different than the way you weave things together.
So this, I'm just saying goodbye because I have to go, but I saw you all and that meant a great deal to me.
Hello and
Bye bye.
Bye.
Just want to say hi.
Hi, Remy.
Is that Remy?
Yeah, Ron Robinson.
Hi,
I
Remy.
love a lot of you.
Anybody else wanna?
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Yes, I think that we're
Just added to context.
getting to the point where
Right, guys.
we're at the end of the day and need to close off.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
thank you, everybody, for dealing with our technical issues and coming to join us.
And thank you for sharing your content.
Yes.
All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast, and if some people want to linger around and have some wrap-up conversation, you can, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast now. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to our 14 viewers that have been popping in and out, have been watching the little thing. Virtually connected.